It's a Tuesday edition. We have a lot of things happening, including on Capitol Hill today. Twitter and Facebook CEOs will get ready to get grilled. It looks like Senator Josh Hawley has been leading the charge on this big tech censorship. Yep. He says he has unmasked and found out about a coordination of all of that against Republicans. So I look forward to seeing some fireworks today on this channel.
Yeah, he's got a whistleblower that's going to blow the lid off of coordination between Twitter and Facebook and those folks. So that's going to be great. Thank you very much for joining us on this very busy, let's see, it's a Tuesday. And it's cold here in New York City. We are currently under a freeze watch, believe it or not.
That's why I wore the vest.
It looks good. Thanksgiving looks good, Brian. Thanksgiving is right around the corner, so go buy your turkey. Don't forget to do that because they're going to run out of those eventually.
Well, are we allowed to have a Thanksgiving?
With this election.
Are we allowed to have a Thanksgiving?
Depends on where you live. In New York, 10 or less, they're saying.
That's right.
All right, we're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, Griff Jenkins is live in Washington as a Georgia election official blames nearly 2,600 uncounted ballots on human error. Hey, Griff.
Steve, good morning. I got to cut into the Thanksgiving chatter because that hand count down in the Peach State is heating up. Now, they've got till midnight tomorrow to finish counting in all 159 counties, but in one of them, Floyd County, a major discovery. Nearly 2,600 ballots were not tallied, according to Gabe Sterling, the director of elections for the state, who explained how this could have happened. Listen.
What apparently it looks like is maybe a memory card from one of the early vote devices was not loaded. And normally that would be caught by, checks and balances within a county, which is the reason the secretary feels like in this particular case, this was an egregious thing and it wasn't discovered until we did this audit.
Now, Sterling says 1,643 votes were for President Trump, 865 for Biden, giving the president a net positive gain of 778 votes. But that's far short of the 14,000 he trails Biden by. This as the president sounding off on the recount, saying officials won't let the campaign look at signature matching, calling on the governor to get involved. But yesterday, Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, shot back.
There's no truth to that. In this past year, the election officials were given the GBI signature match training process, and so they're trained at looking at signatures.
And there's this. Raffensperger also claiming Senator Lindsey Graham, in a call regarding signature matching, pushed him to find ways to invalidate legal ballots. Graham calling the accusation, quote, ridiculous. Meanwhile, out west in Nevada, a special election is called in a Clark County Commission race where the number of voter discrepancies far exceeded the margin of victory. 139 discrepancies in a race where the Democrat led by just 10 votes. The president now taking notice, saying this. Big victory moments ago in the state of Nevada. The all-Democrat county commissioner race on same ballot as president just thrown out because of large-scale voter discrepancy. Clark County officials do not have confidence in their own election security. Major impact, although the discrepancy does not appear to affect the presidential race because Clark County has already certified the results for all races other than that one commissioner one. Brian Ainsley, Steve.
All right, thanks. We'll try to find out if the president's going to get anywhere in this Georgia recount. We're going to get an answer maybe Wednesday, and then we'll see if we do a recount in Wisconsin and see if they make any progress in Pennsylvania. And sooner or later, Joe Biden believes he's going to be president of the United States, and that's what he's planning for. And yesterday, he gave a major economic speech, at which time you thought you'd see some give and some sense of this is where I'd like to negotiate, because at the very least, he's going to have at the most, he's going to have a 50-50 Senate. Even with the vice president, it's not going to be there every single time, all the votes. But there was no give. He talked about a minimum wage. He talked about pro-union with tech firms. He says they nodded. He's about to name an official to head up his treasury that is for reparations. And he's talking about student loan forgiveness. And then when it came to compromise or any type of big picture, it was time for the reporters to ask a few questions. Would they approach any of this? Let's listen.
What do you see as the biggest threat to your transition right now, given President Trump's unprecedented attempt to obstruct and delay a smooth transfer of power?
It doesn't appear that the president is going to come around anytime soon and admit defeat. So what are you going to do? What options do you have to try and ensure that you are ready to go on day one?
I want to get your thoughts on the president's tweet. How did you interpret that? And at the end of the day, do you want him to concede?
What is your message to Republicans who are backing up the president's refusal to concede?
What is your message to people who are considering, for example, getting together with their families and others for Thanksgiving? Would you urge people to reconsider their plans?
So you had a bunch of questions that Donald Trump would love to have had at any point over the last 4 years. He probably had 4 like that in 4 years. But it was questions all about President Trump. Steve, it was all about President Trump. It was all about his supposedly unwillingness to concede, as opposed to, what do you think the $15 minimum wage will do for families and businesses already been stressed out? What about some type of compromise when it comes to a stimulus package? Where do you stand on the threat? Why would you now go back into an Iranian deal when they have denuclearized, they have nuclearized their arms and their program to a point way beyond everyone's threshold?
Do you remember when Saturday Night Live did that parody of the presidential news conference, and they asked, there was such an adoring press corps, at one point the question was, Mr. President, I believe it was of Barack Obama, Mr. President, can I get you a pillow? Because that is, going forward, perhaps a preview of what we're going to see when Donald Trump is no longer president and Joe Biden is the president in the briefing room. At least that's what Joe Concha says. Watch this.
What's a hard-hitting question when you ask somebody about their policy or their worldview or what they plan to do about XYZ? 4 of the first 5 questions were about President Trump, and, well, he's not conceding, and, boy, what does that do for you moving forward? I get that completely, but, again, this is a preview of things to come over the next 4 years. Hospitable instead of hostile, which we saw under the president.
I will say this. Once again, I was speaking to the correspondent assigned to Joe Biden yesterday in Delaware. And once again, they have a list of the news outlets they're going to ask questions of. Fox News is never on the list, Ainsley.
Yeah, I mean, that's what got me about this, Steve, is all the articles I've read about this say that they pre-selected these reporters. So Joe Biden didn't even call on these individuals. You will have to at least hand it to Donald Trump for always taking questions
from everybody.
You know, no matter where he was, exactly. And he would ask the questions. But instead, his staffers, Joe Biden's staffers, are hand-selecting these people that they probably know are going to ask the easy questions. I mean, you remember the ice cream question. Chris Stirewalt called that shamefully embarrassing. And then last week at his first press conference as being elected as president-elect, he got similar questions, very easy questions, too. So I think this is a taste of what we're going to see over the next 4 years if President Trump does concede. All right, so the Democratic Party, we've talked about this week and last week about just the divide within the party and how we called it the Trojan horse, or many people called it the Trojan horse, that they just needed to get him elected, and then we will put our progressive ideas in his head, and hopefully he'll vote for some of our ideas. Well, now there's a divide within the party, and they have to decide which direction they're going. Many of the conservative or more moderate Democrats are blaming the progressives for losing a lot of their House seats. And one of those is Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin. She's from Michigan. She says, you know, what about us? What about Midwesterners? What about Southerners? Everyone who's in leadership positions is from California or from New York. We need to be represented because your ideas are so progressive. That's not how the rest of the country feels. So she says she won't support Nancy Pelosi as the speaker again. This is what she writes. I will not be voting for Nancy Pelosi. I believe, I just lost the prompter. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
I believe, and can we roll it back a little bit? Guys, can you read it?
Sure.
It says, I believe we will need, here we go, Ainsley. I believe we will need new leadership. I'd love to see more Midwesterners because if you look across the leadership, I respect these people, but it's New York and California. Ainsley, you want to finish up? Any final thought there?
You keep going. You keep going.
So let's
finish up with my thoughts. Yeah, that's the end of it. No, really quickly. So being from the South, and you know, Steve, you're from the Midwest. Brian, you're from Long Island. Long Island's extremely conservative now.
We're almost in the water.
It went red. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I appreciate that because everyone needs to be represented. You know, Nancy Pelosi, if you look at what their records are, look at Kamala Harris. She's from California. She co-sponsored the Green New Deal. She praised LA's mayor for slashing the LAPD's budget by $150 million, the police department there. And so this lady, Congresswoman Slotkin, is saying there's no accountability for the speaker, and we should have won big. This defunding the police, this Green New Deal, those are issues that killed our members, she said, Brian.
Yeah, and yesterday, as we move ahead, let's take a look at the House and what has Slotkin and others so concerned, and Democrats. They were supposed to pick up at least a dozen seats. Instead, they lost a dozen seats. So now it is this. They say this could end up being the slightest majority for any party since 1919. It is now 219 to 204. And the latest news is Burgess Owens takes the seat back that Mia Love barely lost to Michael McAdams, and that was 2 years ago. So Burgess Owens fights it out, grinds it out, and becomes the congressman from Utah. And it looks like his opponent, McAdams, who temporarily has the seat, left a concession speech on his voicemail, which is classy. So Burgess Owens, who got drafted by the Jets, but then wanted to win the Super Bowl, sorry, Joel, and went to the Raiders, he is now in Congress, and he was able to not only have a great business career, athletic career, now he's going to start this political career. And you to think about, if you talk about impactful congressman, my projection is he'll be as impactful as Jim Jordan, because he's going to make his voice known. Somebody else who's going to make their voice known is Nicole Malliotakis. She ran for governor, has been a state rep, and now she won a seat in Staten Island. Here's what she said that she thinks the GOP has gained by getting so many seats, but yet not in the majority.
I think people in America are rightfully concerned about attempts to bring socialism to our nation, whether it be the dismantling of our economy or defunding the police or concerns about abolishing ICE or socialized medicine. People are saying, wait a minute, this is not America. I think it was a referendum on what the Socialist Squad has been pushing, and Americans speaking out and saying, you know what, we need to counter this, and we're going to send people who are going to fight for our freedoms and ensure that we are the America that we love, not socialists.
And what I saw, Mark Penn wrote a story today and says what he gets from the gains in the House and the fact that it looks like the Republicans have an excellent shot at holding the Senate is that America's mostly moderate. There were 34% said they were conservative, 23% said they were liberal, but for the most part, Americans are still right in the middle. Yeah. Burgess Owens, by the way, will be on with us in about 30 minutes, and to talk about his victory, another win for him in his career.
Terrific. Meanwhile, we mentioned this at the top of the program. What is your plan for Thanksgiving? It's interesting. Ohio State University did a poll, and apparently a majority of Americans are going to social distance, and they're going to make sure that their guests, if they do have guests come in less than 10 and things like that, they're going to make sure that everybody is safe. However, what is kind of puzzling is about 40% of Americans are planning a big Thanksgiving with more than 10 people, 38%. 27% say they will not have any social distancing at their event, and even 20% said we won't turn away guests who actually have symptoms, which is kind of scary because we know how contagious this is. Nonetheless, here in New York State, the governor has said, okay, if you're going to have Thanksgiving, you can only have no more than 10 people. That's it. That's going to be the statewide limit. Here's the problem. How are they going to figure that out? Are they going to drive up and down streets? Are they going to count the cars? Are they going to watch at the grocery store? Hey, you've got 5 boxes of stovetop stuffing into the patrol car, lady. Absolutely not. At least 4 sheriffs in New York State have already said, we are not going to enforce that dumb rule. People are smart enough and resources are thin. Here's Richard Giardino, Fulton County Sheriff. He was on with Fox and Friends first a little earlier, and he thinks this governor's plan is not a good one. It's a turkey.
The anxiety that this rule is causing is unbelievable. People believe that the governor and other executives want to use law enforcement as a tool to make them submit. When you try to authorize by executive order that we can come into somebody's house, count the people, and take some sort of action, that remedy is greater than the wrong of having people gather. because frankly, I have faith in people in my community to use their intelligence, what they know about the COVID, and make a determination.
Yeah, he's being right. Just be smart. You know what the risks are, and they are substantial because it's contagious, and there are a lot of people who don't show any symptoms. In fact, in October, up north of the border in Canada, they had their Thanksgiving on October the 12th, and the officials there say that the nonchalant approach toward the COVID is the reason Canada is currently spiking. Ainsley.
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So this sheriff, he is so funny. He said, we have limited resources. We have to set priorities. So obtaining a search warrant to enter your home to see how many turkey or tofu eaters are present is not a priority.
There will be no tofu eater at our house. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm going to make an announcement.
We're in New York, though. He represents New York.
Right.
Yes, what is your announcement?
Well, my announcement is I'm going to announce my 10 finalists. I'm going to start with 15 and I'll whittle it down to 10 finalists
Joe Biden
on Wednesday before.
whittling his list down.
And the same way I found out I made the varsity soccer team, my coach had a great thing. He just posted the people who made the team, and the others will just have to find somewhere else to go. So I'll be posting my list of my top 10 people. Everybody else, just know you don't matter as much.
Is this your way?
Right,
is this your way of telling Ainsley and I we're not coming to your house this year?
I'm not saying it's not. It's unlikely. Can I name you alternates? In case there's an injury, someone turns an ankle on the way to the house?
I'll be the first alternate.
Yeah, your first alternate.
No,
we'll see what happens.
Seriously, though, it is spreading, and people do need to be safe. But the sheriff's point is we can make our own decisions. And, you know,
personal
when you're inviting
responsibility.
family, if you have an elderly, exactly.
Right. I just love Jim Jordan's tweet. Don't cancel Thanksgiving. Don't cancel Christmas. Cancel lockdowns. And with that, I would like to accept Jillian Mealy's plea to do the news.
I just want mashed potatoes. Wherever I am, just feed me mashed potatoes, and then I'll be happy.
All right, that's good. Plenty of carbs.
Yes, exactly. Good morning. Let's begin your headlines with this. City and state leaders tightening coronavirus restrictions as cases surge. In Iowa, residents are now required to wear a mask in public, while Virginia tightens its mask mandate and limits alcohol sales. But the tightest rules are in Philadelphia. How about this? All indoor dining is banned. Outdoor dining is limited to just 4 people from the same household. Meanwhile, California Governor Newsom apologizes for breaking his own lockdown rules to attend a party.
We're all human. We all fall short sometimes. I need to preach and practice, not just preach.
Newsom says if cases continue to rise, a curfew could be implemented. Let's talk about extreme weather. Football action now, and the Minnesota Vikings upsetting the Chicago Bears on Monday Night Football. Watch. Gave him some luck, honoring late Jeopardy host Alex Trebek, reading, "We will miss you, Alex." And New Orleans quarterback Drew Brees posting an adorable picture playing doctor with his kids. Or I guess they're playing doctor with him as he recovers from multiple rib fractures and a collapsed lung. He wrote, "I've got the best medical team in the world. We'll be back in no time." That's a cute photo.
Broken ribs,
it looks like they're hugging him.
And he's coming back?
Yep.
Wow. That's awesome.
He's on the mend. All right, Jillian, thank you very much. Well, as we reported in our lead story, the state of Georgia's recount uncovering nearly 2,600 ballots previously unaccounted for. Apparently somebody didn't load the memory stick into the big machine. So what could that mean for other close races? A look at potential implications coming up next on Fox and Friends.
All eyes on Georgia. President-elect Biden likely to make a trip to the Peach State to back the Democrats running for Senate in next year's runoff election.
But will his presence make a difference? Joining us now to react is Texas Congressman Brian Babin. Sir, it is good to see you this morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Let's go ahead and pull up this balance of power right now in the Senate. You can see, Republicans need the votes. They need these 2 votes. If Democrats, Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff, win both of these races, then, we're going to be split here. And Kamala Harris would be the tiebreaker. I'm sure both sides are going to be pulling out all the stops in Georgia. Do you think Joe Biden being there would make a difference for Democrats?
I think it might for some Democrats, but I can tell you, Joe Biden nor Nancy Pelosi are in charge of the Democratic Party. We all know who's in charge of the Democratic Party, and that's the radical left wing. We've already seen Vice President Biden kind of caving in on some of the demands that are being made by that part of his party. And, you know, we're just hoping that there's a free, fair, transparent election in this runoff in Georgia, because, like you just said, it's going to be critical that we keep the U.S. Senate. And but I'm telling you, I'm not giving up on President Trump either. We've had over 400 sworn affidavits seeing anomalies and irregularities and quite frankly, lots of illegalities going on in the presidential race on November the 3rd. So we're hoping that the recount in Georgia will be going well. And the American people have rejected socialism. Patriotic Americans don't want open borders, defunding the police, or single-payer socialized medicine. I think that's been proven in this election, especially on House members.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that recount effort, and big news on that front. Nearly 2,600 ballots were unearthed in Floyd County, Georgia, that were not originally counted in the original vote total. So this gives President Trump 800 more votes, still Joe Biden in the lead in Georgia. But I think this speaks to overall frustration among voters and confusion. Is their vote going to count? So, Congressman, do you think that there should be congressional action on this front, Congress stepping in and figuring out a way to make sure that every single vote counts?
I think there's room for that. Quite frankly, though, the very first bill that Nancy Pelosi introduced in this session in the House was H.R. 1, which was basically a federal takeover of our election process. You know, we're in the minority as Republicans, and it passed the House. But it was rejected by the Senate. However, with the excuse of COVID, Democratic lawyers went to court in a lot of these battleground states, and they actually had the election laws changed using that excuse of public health and safety. And so we wound up with drive-through voting, same-day registration, online registration, extended days for turning in votes, unsolicited ballots. And we, as I said earlier, we've got 400 affidavits that show that a lot of the, even though the laws were changed, there was a lot of illegalities that went on. And so we want to see these Republican legislatures step up in these battleground states too, because you know, without free, open, transparent elections, our constitutional republic will not stand, and we know the consequences. So we want to see fair elections. We want answers to our questions, and President Trump is not out of this thing yet either.
Right. Let's get your take on this before we let you go, because we're running short on time here. Michigan Democrat Elissa Slotkin says this about Nancy Pelosi. This reads, quote, "I will not be voting for Nancy Pelosi. I have no idea if people are going to run against her or who might run against her. And I will, of course, have this conversation directly with her. But I believe we need new leadership." Your reaction?
My reaction is Ms. Slotkin voted with Nancy Pelosi most of the time, an overwhelming amount of the time, and now she almost paid the piper for it. And so I think that, again, I think the American people have spoken. We won back a number of seats. We knocked off a bunch of Democrat incumbents. Every one of our incumbents are coming back in the House. I think we're going to win the Senate. We're going to retain the Senate. And I think President Trump still has a great shot at this if it's done in the right way. But let me tell you, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the two wings of the Democratic Party. But quite frankly, what I'm seeing is the radical socialist wing of it is the one that is prevailing.
Well, it is certainly a party currently divided. It'll be interesting to see if Elissa Slotkin's statement is a sign of things to come for Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you.
Congressman Brian Babin, we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Jillian and Carly.
Have a good day.
Have a good one.
It is 20 minutes after the hour. Governor Gavin Newsom forced to apologize for breaking his own COVID restriction rules.
Did his apology go far enough? That story next.
Senator Susan Collins pushes back against Senator Bernie Sanders' claim that a majority of American people support their progressive agenda.
I think one of the messages that voters sent was they are rejecting that far-left agenda, which includes packing the Supreme Court, defunding our police officers, and also ending the filibuster, Medicare for all, which would decrease the quality and accessibility of health care.
Several Democrats have blamed progressive policies for their string of losses in the 2020 election.
California Governor Gavin Newsom issuing an apology after he was caught attending a party while his state remains under his tight coronavirus restrictions.
We're all human. We all fall short sometimes. I want to apologize to you because I need to preach and practice, not just preach.
The governor came under fire last week after he was caught at a high-end restaurant in wine country with about a dozen friends. Newsom calling his decision to stay a bad mistake. But despite his apology, some Californians calling the controversy par for the course. Dave Rubin, founder of the Rubin Report, says Newsom and his restrictions are out of control.
Gavin Newsom, the governor of the state that I'm in, California, he was the mayor of San Francisco. He wrecked it. There is nobody that wanders around going, oh, San Francisco is doing well. There's nobody that wanders around now going, California is doing well. He's locking us down while he's at a private party at a restaurant indoors with, I believe, 12 people, $400 a plate, while he's telling us that we can't have indoor Thanksgiving in our own houses. I mean, these people are completely out of control.
Despite strict COVID-19 restrictions, California is the second state in the country to have more than 1 million coronavirus cases.
It is 20.
I'm having a lot of meetings with world leaders on the telephone, everyone from the Holy Father to prime ministers across the globe.
And then secondly, I want to follow up with you on the vaccine.
Okay, so more to the point, there were questions ranging from, and I'm paraphrasing here, what are you going to do about the president not conceding the election, about the president's tweets, some on the Moderna vaccine, Joe Biden's Thanksgiving plans. You know, this could be the next president of the United States for the next 4 years. You'd think that they'd come with some more hard-hitting questions, don't you?
Well, what's a hard-hitting question when you ask somebody about their policy or their worldview or what they plan to do about XYZ? For the first 5 questions, Carly, were about President Trump. And, well, he's not conceding. And, boy, what does that do for you moving forward? I get that completely. But, again, this is a preview of things to come over the next 4 years. Hospitable instead of hostile, which we saw under the president. Anyway, Carly, got to go. Have to head over and actually get online early because apparently there's a white tuxedo sale at a place that opens at 6 here near me.
Oh,
and you're just showing right now, Carly, you can wear white after Labor Day. So I thank you for that.
That white suit would really showcase your tan. Did you just call me out on my outfit, Joe?
I think it's tremendous. You know, you're defying society's norms.
Joe, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Wow, Janice, that video is unbelievable.
A tragic situation for the folks in Nicaragua. Unfortunately, this storm hit just 15 miles south of where we had the last storm almost 2 weeks ago, and that was almost a Category 5. So this was a Category 4 when it made landfall, just 1 mile shy of a Cat 5. Catastrophic for this area. This is a humanitarian crisis, unfortunately, for the folks in Nicaragua and parts of Central America. The storm is going to weaken as it goes over land, but man, I mean, the damage is going to be the flash flooding and, of course, the fact that we had winds almost at Category 5. So there's the forecast rainfall, and in some cases over 30, 40 inches of rain on top of what they received 2 weeks ago in almost the exact same area. The rest of the country, fairly quiet. We do have a quick moving system across the Great Lakes and the Northeast, and then the West Coast remains active with more rain along the coast and then the mountain snow that moves in. So that's going to be sort of an ongoing situation over the next week or so. The central U.S. is very quiet and calm, and then we'll get some of this moisture moving in from the west later on this week. But otherwise, a quiet forecast for the U.S., which we are grateful for. Carly and Jillian, my friends, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Janice. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And still ahead, Moderna's vaccine is nearly 95% effective and does not require deep freeze storage.
Dr. Marty Makary says that's a game changer. He joins us next.
Welcome back. America's scientists announcing another breakthrough in the race to find a coronavirus vaccine. Moderna announcing their COVID vaccine is nearly 95% effective. Johns Hopkins University professor and Fox News medical contributor, Dr. Marty Makary, joins me now. Good to see you this morning, Doctor. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Jillian.
Okay, so a number of things to talk about. Let's go ahead and take a look at this distribution goal, which Moderna says 20 million doses by the end of the year, up to 1 billion doses globally by 2021. Can you talk about the significance of this, its effective rate being almost 95% effective, and also its storage capabilities, which makes this one much easier, it seems?
That's right, Jillian. You know, the Pfizer news that we got last week was good news, but it does require a freezer for that particular vaccine to get stored. And in the distribution, having a minus 94-degree freezer is not something, you know, folks have around. It's not something pharmacies have around. This new Moderna vaccine requires simple refrigeration. That is a major game changer for getting it out there. So in the next 4 to 6 weeks, we're probably going to see 2 vaccines in the market and used in high-risk individuals.
Okay, yeah, so you talk about who we could be seeing getting these vaccines soon. Let's go ahead and take a look at the priority groups for the distribution. That includes healthcare workers, essential workers, people with underlying health conditions, and older adults. Marty, my question to you is, you know, a lot of people still wonder at this point the effects of this vaccine long term. I know that we don't have answers on that yet. A lot of people wonder how long immunity might last with this vaccine. I know you don't have the answers, but when do you think we might start to get them?
Well, Jillian, we can extrapolate from some other known coronaviruses, the SARS virus, the MERS virus. We know that immunity lasts for at least 3 years with those particular coronaviruses. So I think it's fair to extrapolate. Now, look, this is a stable virus. We're not seeing a lot of major mutations. But if there are, this vaccine technology and the antibody technology allows you to adapt those treatments to the new mutated strain very easily. So this is a major breakthrough.
Okay. And now we've also seen a lot of new restrictions going into effect in cities across the country. A lot of cases, as you know, are surging across the country. But the question is, you know, with these new lockdowns that we're seeing and restrictions, are they ultimately effective? As a doctor, what's your take?
Well, they are effective in slowing the transmission. The question is, what is the other side effect of the lockdown? If we're creating more death and destruction from substance abuse and mental health disorders and deferred medical care and child abuse, then the lockdowns do not make sense. Now, it's not a question of lockdowns versus let the virus rip. No, we know that slowing the virus down has saved many lives, probably over 2 million lives. The real question is, do we do targeted lockdowns in indoor congregate settings, or at least partial closures where you may limit capacity on the indoor side of a business? And we've got to encourage outdoor activity at every level, at restaurants, beaches, parks. I mean, that is the stuff we never want to lock down.
Yeah, and I realize I called you Marty, which is so casual of me. Dr. Makary,
please do.
Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you, Jillian.
You too. Have a good day.
Jillian, how dare you, little devil. Okay. Good morning. Welcome back. Today, the CEOs of Twitter and Facebook are expected to be grilled by lawmakers on Capitol Hill over political censorship.
Cheryl Cazzoni from our sister network, Fox Business, is here with what we can expect from the Senate hearing. Cheryl?
Yeah, guys, good morning. So Facebook chief Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter's Jack Dorsey are set to testify today in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where they're going to be peppered with questions about anti-conservative bias and how they handle hate speech and misinformation on their platforms. This is the second virtual appearance for the two in less than 3 weeks as pressure intensifies to rein in the power of social media companies. One line of questioning likely to come up will be Twitter's suspension of the New York Post account over the paper's coverage of Hunter Biden's emails. But a lot of things will be covered, obviously, today.
Yeah, absolutely. Meantime, former President Obama has some thoughts on big tech and China, right?
Exactly. Speaking of big tech and social media, President Obama says that social media has turbocharged disinformation. He gave an interview to The Atlantic, and he also said that the liability protections around tech companies has become, quote, untenable. In the same interview, he also said he wished he'd been tough on China. Here's what he said there. And if we hadn't been going through a financial crisis, my posture towards China would have been more explicitly contentious around trade issues, but I couldn't have a trade war in 2009 or 2010.
Cheryl,
surprise there.
Thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. Oh boy, take a look at this. Christmas is on full display at this Georgia Chick-fil-A. The holiday light show brightening the entire neighborhood.
The Chick-fil-A in Athens has made it a tradition to install the impressive light display over the holiday season. The nightly lighting has become a local attraction. So you get your waffle fries, you get into the holiday spirit, watch the light show.
Look up at the lights
while you have a little snack.
I'm hungry.
It's still ahead. Governor Cuomo telling others to admit their mistakes, but what about him and his handling of the coronavirus in nursing homes? New York Post columnist Carol Markowitz says the Democrat is negligent. She joins us next.
The key is to be strong and secure enough to admit your mistakes and admit your shortcomings. Don't get defensive. Denying the mistake only assures repeating the mistake. New York had more cases and more deaths in nursing home because that's who the virus affects. It affects senior citizens. We know that. You look at any state, and they had a tremendous number of deaths in nursing homes.
Governor Cuomo advocating for others to admit their mistakes while refusing to take responsibility himself.
But critics now demanding he release withheld data on New York's nursing home deaths.
Joining us now, New York Post columnist Carol Markowitz. Carol, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Hello, good morning.
When you hear what he has to say right now, what do you feel inside? What do you think? Because I know a lot of people are extremely frustrated still.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen any of that responsibility taken from Governor Cuomo. One of the things that New York does that no other state, or I don't know if a few other states do, and he mentioned in the clip, well, all the other states have the same problem. Well, New York has a particular problem. We count nursing home deaths separately, but when we do that, we only count deaths that happen in the nursing home. So if somebody caught COVID at their nursing home but was then transferred to the hospital, that's not a nursing home death. And that allows him to really skirt on how many deaths there are. It's really important to get a sense of what happened in the spring and what went wrong. And he's absolutely right that we should take responsibility for the things that we did wrong. But I don't see him taking any kind of responsibility at all.
Yeah, you know, you're right. New York says that 6,500 people died of coronavirus in nursing homes. You're saying that that number could be even higher. Why is it so important? Why is it so important for people to know and for us to get that number right?
Well, again, you know, it's part of the picture of what happened, and this might not be our last pandemic. You know, COVID-19 could be followed by, sorry to break it to everybody, COVID-23 and COVID-25 and et cetera. And what we learned from how we handled this one is what we should do, you know, how we should handle things in the future. And for Governor Cuomo, he's decided that his leadership was perfect. He wrote a book about it. He made himself a poster. He's really, really into himself. And I think that that's part of the problem in acknowledging the mistakes that he made, and we can't move forward without that acknowledgement.
Let's talk about schools right now, because we've had this conversation with you many times here on the show. As of now, New York City schools remain open. The future is uncertain, though. Take a listen to what the mayor has to say.
Today, New York City schools are open. Tomorrow, they will be open as well. We've got a fight ahead to keep them open, but I'm not giving up, and you shouldn't give up either.
Okay, so the mayor says that the school situation could change if COVID-19 positivity rate in New York City reaches 3%. As of Monday, it was 2.77% infection rate. You know, that's an alarming statistic because 3% not too far off. Carol, what do you make of this?
Well, as a parent, it's really unsettling that we have to live day to day wondering, is my child going to school today? Well, what about tomorrow? And, you know, not knowing what the future brings. And that 3% statistic, as I've said many times on this show, is a false statistic. That relies on healthy people getting tested. The 3% is not 3% of COVID cases by population. It's 3% of all tests. So if 97% of the people in line to get COVID tests are not healthy and just getting it for various to the unions, and they really have no choice at this point but to close at 3%.
Yeah, but why 3%? Why was that number? It's like a magic number. Why was that one chosen?
You know, I don't know. It was part of the negotiations with de Blasio getting the unions to allow schools to open. And they must have chosen it because it is quite low and because they didn't want schools to open. And so the compromise was, well, this really absurdly low number is what closes schools. Of course, you know, as he also has said, if we hit 3% and schools close, but then we go down to 2.5%, oh no, schools aren't opening again. That, we have metrics to close, but never to open.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of parents out there all across this country trying to figure out a plan for when that happens, hoping that it doesn't. A lot of parents want their kids in school still. We will continue to follow it, as I know you will. Carol, keep us updated on everything, okay?
Thank you, will do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carol. Okay, set your DVRs for 4 a.m. Eastern every morning so you never miss a minute.